I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. For I say, through the grace given to me, to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think soberly, as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith. In Romans 12, Paul urges us to present our bodies a living sacrifice. Most assume that bodies speaks of the physical frame, and there's some truth to this. However, if my understanding of the natural and spiritual bodies in 1 Corinthians 15:44 is correct, Paul is referring to the soul. In fact, bodies may refer to all three, that is, our whole spirit, soul, and body. Strong's even defines the word bodies as the body, as a sound whole, used in a very wide application, literal or figurative. The first man, Adam, was made a living soul, portraying our entrance into this world as a natural body. The last Adam was made a quickening spirit, portraying our exit from this world as a spiritual body. This defines the beginning and ending stages of resurrection, or sowing and reaping, working within every individual. Between the natural and the spiritual is the carnal. In the concept of self-denial, it is the natural body or soul that is destined for loss. In Matthew 10:39, 16:24 through 28, Mark 8:35, and Luke 9:24, the word rendered life in the King James is the word usually rendered soul. This is the Greek transliteration psyche, defined by Strong's as breath. It's from this Greek word that we get our contemporary word psyche, meaning the totality of the human mind, whether conscious or unconscious. This fits well with Paul's discourse in Romans 12, where we are told to be transformed by the renewing of the mind, and in direct contrast to the idea of thinking more highly of ourselves than we should, we're admonished to be a living sacrifice. There is the spirit of this world and the spirit which is of God. The spirit of God, self-sacrifice. The spirit of the world, self-serving. And the latter, pride, which I define as the inordinate love of the self. Within the understanding of the solar self lies another hint regarding universalism. I say this a lot, and I do it purposely to emphasize it. Everyone is in the process of resurrection. It is not exclusive to believers. If needed, read the previous 4 references again and note that regardless of choice, the loss of the soul is inevitable. Why? Because the concept of sowing and reaping requires it. It is an unchanging and immutable law. God fashioned this principle in such a way that he reaps the fullness of the earth in every age. The earth is the Lord's and all its fullness, the world and those who dwell therein. So, allow me to make this very important point. In all 4 references regarding self-denial, Jesus says, his life. Whoever seeks to save his life, whoever loses his life. In other words, there is the self that we have fashioned, and there is the self which God has formed. Note the following. We know that our old self was crucified with him in order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing, so that we would no longer be enslaved to sin. Look closely at how this reads. The old self was crucified with him, that is, with Christ. This is past tense, meaning it's a done deal. Why was this done? In order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing. The word body and body of sin, this refers to that old self, the one we have fashioned or formed. In keeping with our passages in Romans 12, we can also say that it corresponds to our way of thinking. Consider the following. Put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. Do you see it? The old self corresponds to the former manner of life. And where are we first renewed? In the spirit of our minds. The word spirit is defined by Strong's as a current of air, that is, breath. Now, remember, the word soul also means breath. So, how do we explain this? Here's my take. The soul is the expression of the breath of the Spirit. Naturally speaking, breathing is a subconscious action until it is affected by external or internal problems. We breathe in and out, not giving any thought to how many times a day we do this. We breathe when we're awake, and we breathe when we're asleep. And this, dear friend, defines the difference between death and life. When we're asleep, we're unconscious, unaware of our surroundings. It is during this state of unconsciousness that we develop our expression, our life or soul or self. Now, with all of this in mind, note the following regarding Peter, John, and James, Christ on the Mount of Transfiguration. Now it came to pass about 8 days after these sayings that he took Peter, John, and James and went upon the mountain to pray. As he prayed, the appearance of his face was altered, and his robe became white and glistening. And behold, 2 men talked with him, who were Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his decease, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. But Peter and those with him were heavy with sleep. When they were fully awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men who stood with him. No doubt, the Mount of Transfiguration is one of the most amazing things recorded in Scripture. Note that it was Moses and Elijah on the mountain, typifying the law and the prophets. Then note that his disciples were heavy with sleep, and it wasn't until they were fully awake that they saw his glory and the 2 men who stood with him. Fully awake. Friend, when this is true, we'll see his glory, recognizing that he is the fulfillment of the law and the prophets. Moses, Elijah, and Christ. 3 men. 3 is a complete witness and the number of resurrection. Note what follows after. Then it happened as they were parting from him that Peter said to Jesus, Master, it is good for us to be here. And let us make 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah, not knowing what he said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were fearful as they entered the cloud. The voice came out of the cloud saying, This is my beloved Son, hear him. Peter wanted to make 3 tabernacles, but the Father is clear. We need only hear his beloved Son, who exemplifies the law and the prophets, bringing both together in himself in love. There is the old self, which is the body of sin, and there is the new self, which is created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. And I emphasize, the first we form, but the second he created. The first is fashioned from pride, out of our own mind, will, and emotions, while the second remains in the bosom of the Father. The spirit of the mind, Paul said, connecting spirit or breath to the mind or thinking. They are inseparable. So it is that thoughts become words that are spoken by means of breath. No wonder we're told that death and life are in the power of the tongue. Let me say it plainly. The old self is destroyed, utterly and completely, not just in some, but in all, reflected in the dying of the seed in the earth. Remember, we seek to save this old self, we lose it. But if we lose it for His sake, we discover the life of the new self. The old way of thinking corresponds to the body of sin being brought to nothing. How is this accomplished? This, dear friend, is the reason for aionian fire, why so many still believe in eternal torment. That said, I'll stop and pick up from here in the next study. Be sure to join me, and please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe, and I truly and sincerely thank you for being a part of Grain of Wheat Publishing.